The young girls of this country, their growing days we bless. We brings them silks and satins, out of which they makes a dress. To gain the heart of some young man, as fancy dresses do, don't never despise the sailor boys that sails the ocean blue. When speaking of a man ashore, we never hear you say, he's a common this or a common that, be his calling what it may. Be he a travelling tinker, or a scavenger, or a sweep, then why call us common sailors who battle with the deep?
Hello and welcome to The Bad Spot and episode 5 of The Last Starmarked, my Sundered Isles campaign. At the top of the episode you will have heard an excerpt from the sea shanty Common Sailors, read wonderfully by Sam Langford. Sam is a science communicator, TTRPG performer and producer who focuses on creating stories that show how social justice, STEM and capitalism are interlinked, and you can find more on Sam's wonderful work linked down in the description below. And whilst you're rooting around down there, why don't you leave a like, subscribe and click the little bell icon so you can follow along with the campaign each and every week. These things are really important for supporting the channel and supporting what I do, and if you really want to support the channel, then why not check out the Bad Spot Patreon. There you'll get early access to all episodes, exclusive behind the scenes content, and your name on screen like these lovely people. Last time out, Gideon arrived in Fool's Rest to find the usually bustling smugglers' town a dismal, desolate place surrounded in an unusual, ever-present mist. Not wanting to prolong his stay a moment longer, he enters the local tavern and boldly proclaims to be a bounty hunter on the trail of Felicity Devereaux. This gambit sort of works, as the barkeep confirms that she has in fact been through town. However, the uncomfortable truth of the matter is that she has already left for the port of Crown Falls, headed with a guide through an elaborate system of smugglers' tunnels and caves known locally as the Warren. With this new information, Gideon leaves the tavern to formulate a plan, but is set upon in the mist by 3 assailants, 3 thugs drawn to the scarlet mark on his back. However, these thugs have been changed by some eldritch force, taking on the appearance of the recently drowned, brought back to shambling life, their eyes now black, abyssal voids. Cornered, he must fight his way out of the situation, but has to use all his guile and the environment to his advantage. He manages to dispatch 2 with Lorenzo's help, with mortal wounds causing his attackers to leak water until they disappear completely. As he tries to escape the last cursed creature, a mysterious figure intervenes, a masked vigilante expertly wielding twin hatchets, who brings it down. They reveal that the settlement of Fool's Rest has come under a dreadful curse since an ancient sunken artifact arrived. The artifact has the transformative effect of turning people into these abyssal creatures, and the person who is holding it has retreated to the Warren to escape them. Still believing Gideon to be a bounty hunter capable of single-handedly taking out 2 of these monstrous forms, the vigilante reveals they plan to steal the artifact and wish to enlist Gideon to help them. Okay, so quite a lot happened last time. We managed to pick up Felicity's trail again, which is good in terms of our vow to track her down. So let's look and see if we've made some progress. Let's have a look at the move, reach a milestone. It says when you make headway in your quest by doing any of the following, and gives us a few options. Now, I think the big thing that happened here is that we fought our way past the abyssal nightmare zombies, and I apologise that I haven't come up with a better name for them, but I think that's definitely defeating a notable foe, so we can mark progress as per the rank of the vow. The vow is extreme, so 2 ticks takes us up to 2 out of 10. And I think that's about it. I don't think that any of this ties into our background vow, so that might be as far as it goes in terms of progress. So With that out of the way, let's begin. It is a crisp, cool and clear summer's night in Fool's Rest. There is no fog, no persistent clinging mist. There are no glyphs frantically carved into the woodwork and no hastily constructed guard tower. It is, as it's always been, a bustling place in which to buy and sell. No questions asked and no strings attached. Two smugglers, a big heavy-set man and a small, gaunt woman, are waving their passengers up the steps from their longboat that has been moored against the ramshackle dock, and these passengers slowly file up the steps as the smugglers watch. Two passengers, well-dressed, maybe too well-dressed for a place like this, pause to consult a map that one of them is holding. Unseen, the little smuggler smiles, and the ruby set into her tooth glints in Wraith's pale blue moonlight. And as Wraith's light shines down, two red handprints on the backs of those well-dressed passengers begin to glow. Up on the promenade that runs from the tavern all the way around the dock, three men, mean-looking thugs, lay in wait, lurking in the dim light of an alleyway. One of them notices the glowing handprint on the back of the passengers, who are still checking their map, oblivious as to what lies in wait. All three men share a look. They've done this dozens of times, maybe even hundreds of times. Easy pickings. The thugs fan out, moving quietly, surreptitiously into position. And the passengers consulting their map don't know it yet, but they are cut off. They are surrounded. They have no easy means of escape. They are outnumbered, outmuscled, outmaneuvered. There is no law here. There will be no one coming to their aid. This is just how it goes in Fool's Rest. And as they stand oblivious to what is about to happen, the first thug moves in. His role is to distract, to confuse, and whilst they're doing that, the others will come around back. They'll grab the marks, drag them in the alleyway. That's how it goes. But as he gets their attention, as he opens his mouth to start the distraction routine, no words come out. Just water. And it's just dribbling at first, then streaming. And he holds his hand over his mouth to stop it, but it won't. And the passengers recoil at this horrifying sight. And the other thugs off to the side are now seeing this unfold. They still think it's a distraction, right? They will just grab the passengers and get on with it. But as they do, they realize the passengers themselves have dropped their map and are clutching their faces, trying to stop black water flooding out of their mouths, eyes, and ears. And the other two thugs are about to turn and run when they both notice a sudden change. A shroud of thick mist has quickly enveloped them, suddenly and completely. The temperature drops, and they can neither see nor hear each other. One thug is suddenly, violently pulled to the floor by a powerful, invisible force. As he hits the dock, he can see his comrades, his fellow thugs, pinned to the ground, trying to fight free. The passengers are also writhing around, water spouting freely from their faces. And then all of them are dragged painfully along the dock and into the water. And this invisible force drags them, pulls them further out to sea, and deeper into the dark, and each of them fights back or tries, but one by one, the struggling eventually stops, and they are drowned, their lives snuffed out in the deep. And the moonlight cuts through the water, and its pale green rays illuminate the corpses still being pulled further and further down. The pressure of the depths builds and builds as their bodies collapse, twisting into crumpled, distorted forms under the weight. And they finally come to a stop on the ocean floor, kicking up plumes of sand miles beneath the surface. Hours pass, then days, and as they do, these drowned souls are slowly joined by dozens more, lifeless forms suspended on the ocean floor, eyes now black abyssal voids. Here they wait to be called to the surface. Now, if that wasn't clear, that was a flashback. I felt like we needed that. And this happens a lot on the show. The story and the hows and the whys sometimes diverge a little and become a little woolly. And whilst I don't normally get hung up on the hows and the whys, I felt like what was going on here could do with a little clarification, because when you come up with stuff kind of on the fly, sometimes you think about it differently once you've sat with it for a while, and that's kind of what's happened over this past week. So hopefully this prologue fills in a little bit of what happened when the relic arrived, and also why I said that initially there were like hundreds of people who lived there, and now there are hardly any. There's just like a couple of dozen people in a tavern. So I hope that kind of fills in some of those blanks, but also isn't kind of like doing the whole, hey, let's explain all the plot holes thing, which is very common in today's climate. I just wanted to kind of add a bit more, and I kind of felt like that prologue did. So we're back in the present, and Gideon and the vigilante are exactly where we left them last time, in this alleyway, and they are locked in this tense standoff. The vigilante has stated their intention to steal the relic from whoever is holding it, and they want or need Gideon's help. And Gideon's got a lot to consider, right? Like, he has no allies here. He needs to get out of Fool's Rest. And if what the vigilante is saying is true, then the only way out is through the Warren. And I think he's inclined to believe them. Because the smugglers, when they dropped him off, they turned tail and rode away very quickly. So this might be his best, if not only, chance. And as they both stand looking each other over, the silence is suddenly disturbed by the clanging of a bell. And as they both stand, like looking each other over, the silence is disturbed by the clanging of a bell, or if not a bell, like something metal, and someone hitting that something metal incredibly hard to raise an alarm. And it is coming from the guard tower behind them. The vigilante quickly gathers up their hatchets from the floor and says, "We need to move fast." And Gideon does. This person has saved his bacon, and I think his instinct is to trust them. And Lorenzo isn't so sure, and kind of follows along with a suspicious look on his tiny little monkey face. And they spill out onto the dock, and the vigilante kicks open the door of what looks like an abandoned building. Gideon follows them inside, and it is abandoned, and it's a workshop, a metal workshop by the looks of what's been left behind. And this seems to have happened very recently. Whoever the people were that operated this place seemed to have left in a hurry. And the vigilante closes the door behind Lorenzo as he scampers in to join them. And the vigilante moves around behind the workbench and over to a large cupboard on the back wall. And they kind of shift it to one side with a shove to reveal this small arched passageway, only a metre or so high. And the vigilante drops to a crouch and crawls in, disappears into the dark. And Gideon looks to Lorenzo, and they both share this concerned expression, but with little choice other than to head back out and maybe have to confront more of those things. They both follow. It's pitch black. Gideon can't see anything. He puts his hands out to kind of feel the way, and his hands touch brick. He follows them up and realizes he can stand and gets to his feet. Up ahead there is a brief flash, a spark, and then light. The vigilante has struck their hatchets together and sparked up a torch that is nestled in a sconce on the wall. And the warm flame quickly illuminates the immediate area. The vigilante takes down the torch and holds it out towards Gideon, encouraging them to grab one and light it up, and he does. And there's now enough light to see in kind of either direction, far enough to see that they are in a long tunnel that seems to go on a considerable distance. And I think at this point, Gideon feels like he needs to ask. He says, "So do you want to tell me what we're stealing?" And the vigilante turns to him and holds out the hatchet. The blade glistens by the torchlight, inches from Gideon's face. And Gideon says, "Seriously?" "Swear it." And we are going to swear another iron vow here. So let's take a look at the move. Swear an iron vow says when you swear to complete a quest, write your vow and give it a rank. So I'm going to keep this pretty simple. The vow is going to be recover the sunken relic. And in terms of how hard it's going to be, I think it's going to be pretty straightforward in terms of what we have to do, and the quest framework is going to be pretty linear. So I'm going to say this will be troublesome. And when I say quest framework, what I mean by that is how I envision the vow panning out. Now, a troublesome ranked vow marks progress 3 boxes at a time. So I tend to think about these as a 3-act structure, right? And you could say it's finding the relic, stealing the relic, and escaping with the relic, right? And whilst the dice and other things mean that it might not play out that way, it is good to have at least a broad structure of what your vow might entail before you swear it, because otherwise you can very easily end up getting lost in the weeds. And it gives you something to aim for. And I do this all the time, like off camera, just sort of sketch out what I think the arc of a vow will be. And it gives you a little structure to play around in. And like I said, it does get derailed, but having that structure there to return to is never a bad thing. So, anyway, swear an iron vow says, then you roll plus heart. If you swear this vow to a connection, add +1. If you share a bond, add +2. Now, we are not swearing this vow to a connection or bond, so it will be a flat roll. So let's swear an iron vow, rolling plus heart. A strong hit. On a strong hit, you are emboldened, and it is clear what you must do. Take +2 momentum. So our momentum bumps up to 7. Okay, so that's good. And I think that Gideon can use this kind of strong hit to his advantage, and I think he's going to try and ask for something in return. So let's ride this strong hit like we stole it. Okay, so Gideon is looking at the blade of the hatchet and looking into those striking green eyes the vigilante has, and Gideon steals himself. They need help to steal the relic, and he's going to make sure he gets something in return. So he says, what's to say I do your dirty work for you, then end up with this hatchet between my shoulder blades? And the vigilante tilts their head curiously and says, what's to say your dagger won't end up in my back the second we leave the warren? Gideon says, seems like we're both depending on each other here.
It appears so.
So we pinch this thing and head to Crown Falls, right? The vigilante nods. I help you with the theft. You see us out of here.
This seems amenable.
And Gideon fixes them with a look and says, swear it. And they both clasp their hands on either side of that hatchet blade and say,
By iron, I vow.
And I think that Gideon trusts this. I think he is pretty sure this is enough to guarantee his safety. And you know what? It's also progress, because looking at the move reach a milestone, we can see that amongst the options, earning vital support is one. And I think that getting the vigilante on side is definitely earning vital support. So this definitely counts as progress. So we can mark another couple of ticks against our extreme vow here. So up to 2.5 out of 10. And Gideon looks the vigilante dead in the eye, comforted somewhat by the fact that he feels like he can trust them. And he says, now, want to tell me what it is that we're stealing?
The crown of tides.
Now, a very small number of you are thinking, where have I heard that before? Oh, and you might not be able to place it. But I'll tell you. Well, I've been thinking about what this relic could be between episodes, and it prompted me to have a little look at the oracles, and specifically the treasure oracles, and more specifically the cursed treasure oracles. And one thing on that list jumped out at me immediately, and it fits so perfectly for this situation, and that is 24. A crown of jagged seashells and sharp coral that binds its wearer to the sea. Now, the reason that a very small number of you will now be nodding your heads in some kind of recognition is because this very crown that fits so perfectly for this situation has already appeared in this story before. Gideon has already stolen this once already, and the reason that most of you won't remember it, it's because it happened in the live show that I did at the UK Game Expo, where we needed a MacGuffin for the episode, and we rolled this up completely at random, and one of my wonderful audience came up with the name. Anyone got any ideas of this crown? The crown of something? The crown of tides. Do you want to come up? Do you want to swap? This feels like anyone could do this. Now, I honestly have agonized over this all like the past 2 weeks. Like, should I make the relic the crown of tides? Is that too improbable for this relic to be crossing Gideon's path again? Is it shoehorning in a callback just because I can? And I've talked on this show endlessly before about joining the dots and making what might seem disparate story beats matter. But were these two dots too hard to join? And I realized after wrestling with it that no, I think it's just cool. And I also think it's quite funny that Gideon stole this already in his past and had no idea of the incredible power that it had. Because in the live show, when we rolled it up, it was literally just the MacGuffin. It was just something to get the plot moving. And now I think it's really fun to bring it back as an actually important thing to the story. And just FYI, before anyone gets kind of too bent out of shape about not being there at the live show and missing out on something, I'll put that episode up at Christmas time as a little mid-season treat. But I want to kind of make clear that what happened in that episode isn't actually relevant to what's happening now, and you aren't missing out if you weren't there, so don't fret. I just thought it was incredibly cool that the perfect fit for this relic just so happened to be something that we rolled up at random in the live show. So that's what's happening. And here's a funny thought that I thought of just before I started recording. Like, before we roll this into the fiction, like, does Gideon recognize the name? Like, can he even remember stealing it the first time? And that's an incredibly funny idea to me, that the thing that's causing all this trouble is something that he stole years ago and has completely forgotten about. But I think that, like, just saying it now, like, whilst that is funny, I think he has to remember it right. I think he knew then that it was probably important and what it was, but maybe just not, what kind of power it held. So the vigilante sees Gideon's reaction and says,
"You know of this relic?"
and Gideon says, "You could say that." And Lorenzo gives this little kind of whine at the memory of how all that went down. And Gideon chooses not to dwell on it or go into details. So let's do the same, I think. Let's get moving. So we're following our guide because they know the way. And I think this needs to be a roll. So this is going to be a move, and that move is set a course, which says when you travel a known route through perilous seas, across hazardous terrain, or within a mysterious site, roll plus supply. Now, our supply is good. Our supply is 5. We're at max, although we totally whiffed this the last time we rolled. And that's actually how we became embroiled in this mess. So let's set a course. Rolling plus supply. Okay, that is a strong hit. On a strong hit, you reach your destination and the situation there favours you. Take +1 momentum. So we can bump our momentum up to 8, which is pretty decent. Okay, so the situation favours us, but actually, where are we going? So I've been thinking about this, and I think there is a central area of the Warren, which is kind of like a junction that leads off in all the other directions. And I think that junction, this nexus really, is where all paths through this place connect. And I think that place is called the Heart. It's the heart of the Warren. And I think that is where we find what we are looking for. The people who are holding the relic have retreated here. And I think that it's their thought that that's going to keep them safe. And their plan is no better than that. Like, they are just hiding away in here, like blocking the way in and out. It's not a good plan, but when you are faced with the ocean, dragging people into the water, turning them into abyssal zombies, then spitting them back out again to try and get the crown back, you got to kind of just do anything you can, I suppose. So retreating into the depths of the Warren is probably about as safe as these people can be. And I think that's actually what the tower was constructed for. And that bell that was being clanked earlier, that's these people's associates warning them that the drowned have come back onto land. So I also think that, like, there's probably similar warning systems through this Warren. Like, whenever the alarm is raised on the dock, it gets relayed, like the beacons of Gondor. So, like, there'll be the watchtower, and then one a little bit further in, and a little further, and a little bit further, and a little bit further, and that's kind of how the alarm gets raised. And so Gideon, to this point, has followed the vigilante through what seems like miles and miles of tunnels. And that's when they hear that clanging alarm ring out loud and clear just up ahead. And the vigilante holds out their hand for Gideon to stop and says,
"We're here."
Okay, firstly, let's mark progress because we have found our way to the heart. So on our recover the sunken relic vow, that fills out 3 boxes, up to 3 out of 10. Okay, right. So the sound of the bells being rudely and loudly clanked isn't the only thing that alerts them to their arrival in the heart. There has been a change that Gideon only really just notices now, but as he looks back along the length of the tunnel that they've just moved down, he can see that this actually started gradually much, much further back. This part of the tunnel is lined with something, and it's patchy further back, like where they've come from, but now it's much, much more dense. The tunnel is lined with these jagged crags of pale blue coral. And at first it looks dead. It looks almost fossilized. But on closer inspection, it is very much alive and very much thriving. And it has this unnatural, almost spectral hue. And it even looks like it has this bioluminescent kind of bluish glow, but that doesn't make sense. And Lorenzo is making his discomfort clear about this as he pads along behind. Whilst Gideon has stopped to look at this strange infestation, I suppose, the vigilante has wandered off ahead out of sight. Gideon catches up to them and finds them crouched behind the lip of kind of almost like a balcony type structure that looks down into where this opens out into a kind of more open area. And Gideon scans the surroundings quickly. And this can't be the heart, it's too small. From where they are, there are steps down to the right, and those steps lead down to an antechamber, which is only a few meters across. And it has 3 or 4 tunnels leading off it, and they are all very narrow. And in the center of this antechamber is a tall wooden frame, which looks much like a gallows. And hanging from these gallows is what looks like a tin bath. And there are 2 men slowly, rhythmically clanging it with these big, heavy clubs. And the sound is almost deafening as it echoes around the chamber and off into the tunnels. Lorenzo has his little hands over his little monkey ears to protect himself. And the entire chamber is bathed in this pale blue light because the entire place, every inch, is covered in this coral. The walls, the tunnels, the wooden frame, the bathtub, and even more disturbingly, the men hitting it. After striking it one last time, they stop, but the echoes still reverberate. And the men sounding this alarm look pained. They are ungainly. They move awkwardly. Gideon looks closer and sees they don't have coral growing on them. It's growing through them. There are ragged barbs of this stuff bursting painfully through their skin. And the vigilante quietly draws both hatchets and nods to Gideon as if to say, "Are you ready?" And to be clear, Gideon is not ready. Lorenzo covers his eyes this time. The vigilante hauls themselves up and vaults gracefully over the balcony into the room below. And before Gideon realizes he's even doing it, he has his dagger ready and leaps into the fray. And this isn't going to be a fight or a battle. I want to make this move with just one roll, and I think it's going to be face danger because Gideon, he's not initiating this, he's just kind of going along with it. I think if he was starting the fight, I'd be more inclined to handle it like one, but here I think face danger is perfect. So let's have a look at the move. Face danger says, when you attempt something risky or react to an imminent threat, envision your action and roll. And with the options presented, I think that this ambush, I guess, of sorts, is using deception, stealth, or trickery. So let's face danger. Rolling plus shadow. That's a miss. On a miss, you fail, or a momentary success is undermined by a dire turn of events. Pay the price. Okay, so these guys ring the bell, like they are the... Because we are kind of near the heart now. They are the kind of the last part of this early warning system. There's this kind of bell relay. So if they raise the alarm that we're here, we're cooked, right? So I'm gonna burn the momentum because I rolled low enough here that I can turn this into a strong hit. So momentum reset to 2. Making this a strong hit. It says on a strong hit, you are successful, take +1 momentum. So that momentum springs instantly back to 3. So this goes down exactly as the vigilante planned. And I think Gideon perhaps executes his part of this a little less convincingly. I think that the vigilante falls with this cat-like grace from the position that they were all in up above, and they drop into this kind of perfect 3-point superhero landing. Because remember, we rolled up that they were flamboyant. It wasn't flamboyant. It was flashy, wasn't it? That was it, flashy. And as they drop to that landing, they unleash both hatchets in this kind of flurry of silver. And one hits the first bell ringer right in the chest, and they kind of stumble backwards, clutching ungainly like at the ivory-handled blade now buried in their sternum, and then they collapse to the ground, gasping their last breath before going very still, being very dead. But I think the second hatchet kind of launched with a flourish as the vigilante landed. I think it misses, and I think that it ends up embedded in the coral on the wall behind the bell. But the second bell ringer doesn't get far in terms of escape, because Gideon crashes into them from above, and his dagger, which is, I think, held out more in hope than anything else, finds its mark in the nape of the bell ringer's neck, who is killed instantly. And the vigilante turns quickly to kind of catch just this part of Gideon falling, and it makes it look like a perfectly executed stealth kill. But what it was in fact 99% gravity. And the vigilante looks at Gideon and kind of nods in this kind of approval of such a professional and merciful kill. And I think Gideon has to do everything in his power to hide how uncomfortable that makes him feel. And he looks down at the dead bell ringer. And it's a man, maybe middle-aged, but it's kind of hard to tell through all the coral that has almost completely overtaken him. There is just his mouth maybe, and one eye kind of remaining of what made him human, I guess. And Gideon perhaps uses this transformation to convince himself that he had ended this person's suffering rather than murdered them. Gideon's morals are loose, but he's not one for killing, and he will never be okay with it. And the vigilante gathers their hatchets up, ready to press on. And they check maybe the two of the bigger tunnels that are leading off his antechamber, and they figure they know the right one to go down. They motion for Gideon to follow, and he does. And we're going to find the heart at the end of this corridor. We rolled a strong hit on the set of course move, meaning we were able to get the jump on these bell ringers. We've made it to the heart, and we are going to find out who has taken the crown of tides. And what I want to get into with this, and kind of what I'm getting at with all the coral stuff that we've seen, I want to see what effect this has had on the person who is in possession of it, right? And I think that what we find is suitably disturbing. I didn't really expect this to go quite as hard in a body horror direction, but here we are. This is kind of what happens if you use the cursed die a lot. You end up facing down horrors such as these. So the person who took the crown of tides, and we've not really established who they are, and I actually am not going to, because I don't think it's important. I think the basic detail that they were a smuggler who came across it somehow and brought it to Fool's Rest is enough. The important detail about all this is that person put it on, right? That was the mistake that they made. When they put it on, everything changed. The crown of tides binds its wearer to the sea, but this person, whoever has put it on, is refusing the call, and as a result, the ocean is sending these abyssal golems to hunt for it. And whoever this person is, they've retreated here, they've retreated underground where they think they're safe, but the crown has had this bizarre effect, causing this strange spectral coral to bloom all around. And I guess it's in a way trying to make the surroundings as oceanic or ocean-like as possible. And this is the scene that greets Gideon and the Vigilante as they move into the heart. The heart is quite big. I imagine it to be the size of like a large hall, maybe 25 meters square. And there are these huge pillars that connect the floor with the cavernous domed ceiling. And now they are either completely covered in coral or the structures are made of coral. It's very hard to tell. Every inch of this place is covered in it and it crunches noisily underfoot. And Gideon and the Vigilante each tuck in behind one of these pillars and look into the center of the room. And that's where they can see that there is another structure that has risen out of the ground. It's about 2 or 3 meters high. And it's a throne. It's blooming out elaborately where the headrest is. And there are these kind of coral spindles. And upon the throne sits a person. And sits is maybe too strong. Like they are like kind of slumped to one side. And it's hard to tell much about them as their face is covered to the mouth. The crown of tides has grown into this poor foolish person's head. They have become one with it since putting it on. And it is not only changing everything around them, it is changing them completely. There is no one else in this room, just a king in exile. So what are we going to do? We need a plan. And Gideon has... I think Gideon's wandered into enough traps in his time to kind of think that this might be easy. Like he's a little too wise for that. So the two of them are going to have a quick chat, have a quick conflab and come up with a plan. And mechanically, we'll represent that by making the move secure an advantage, which says when you assess a situation, make preparations or attempt to gain leverage, envision your action and roll. And I think this is very much looking to see what they can see to try and get closer to the crown. Like there seems to be an opportunity here. Like there's no alarms that can be raised nearby. There's no one else here. So let's take advantage of that and do something about it and try and steal the crown quickly. So we are going to be using our expertise, focus, and observation. So they're both going to take a look at the situation, figure out what's what. So let's secure an advantage, rolling plus wits. Okay, that is a weak hit. It's not too bad. On a hit, you succeed. On a strong hit, you can take both the options. On a weak hit, choose one. And we've got 2 options. We can take momentum or +1 on our next move. I think we will take the momentum here. I think that's going to be better for us in the long term. So we hop up to 5. So what is the plan? I think Gideon has kind of assessed the layout of the room, and I think that he has picked out a route across the floor, and he kind of looks where he can kind of duck in and out of cover using the pillars as he does, and he points out a similar route for the Vigilante to take on the other side of the room. And Gideon is going to try and get close enough to run up this short stack of coral that's built up around the foot of the throne, and he's going to run up that. And he is going to throw himself towards the throne. He is going to grab the crown and yank it off the head of the King of Tides. And I think the Vigilante will be ready with their hatchets in case anything goes down. It's not much of a plan, run up to a person, pull the crown off their head. But it's what we got. And we are going to go with it. So they both quietly stalk their way across the room, and they are cautiously scanning for movement, and there's nothing. There is no sound, no movement, nothing. There is total silence. They each duck carefully behind the pillars at regular intervals. Lorenzo is following closely behind Gideon. They are all very much erring on the side of caution. And they get close enough. Gideon looks at those steps, looks at the footing, and readies himself. And then he runs. It's just a few short paces to the throne, up those steps, until he launches himself. His hands are outstretched, ready to grab the crown and jerk it off the king's head. And this is a move, and that move is Face Danger, which once again says when you attempt something risky or react to an imminent threat, envision your action and roll. And this is definitely with speed and agility. So let's Face Danger, rolling plus edge. Not only has this failed, it has failed so hard. That is a miss with a match, and our momentum of 5 isn't going to do anything against the 2-8. So we are going to have to suck this up, and this is going to be very, very bad. On a miss, you fail, or a momentary success is undermined by a dire turn of events. Pay the price. Okay, so this is going to go badly, but how is it going to go badly? I'm actually going to, for once, roll on the pay the price table. So let's see what it says. 44. The environment or terrain introduces a new hazard. Okay, so I think the terrain means the coral, right? So that ghostly material covering everything that's all come from the crown. And I think it makes sense that, like, with the crown being threatened, the coral, this kind of living organism, will respond. And I think that Gideon is going to be attacked by the coral, but not just by a bit of coral that comes at him. I think that a coral construct is going to rise up and defend the king. So this coral construct needs to have a shape. And I figured that we would roll on the Creatures Oracle in the Starforged book to find out just what shape it's going to take. 67 is snake or eel. Okay, yeah. I mean, it's got to be an eel, right? And more specifically, it's got to be a moray eel, right? Because those guys are fucking awful. Like, they are horrible, and it makes like perfect sense with the coral and the fact that the moray eels are kind of like coral lurkers. So let's envision this. So Gideon launches himself towards the throne and reaches out for those jagged kind of points of the crown before the silence that's just been there this whole time is suddenly broken by this almighty commotion. It's this mixture of cracking and groaning and the sound of the clattering of all these coral plates against one another. And Gideon is violently ripped out of the air, and he's kind of turned around and tumbled over and over. And it's so disorientating that it takes him a moment to realize that he has been snared and he is being squeezed by a mighty, giant, powerful form that is constricting around him. The power of the crown has given supernatural life to the coral in this room, and this mighty, monstrous eel coiling between the pillars holds Gideon in place as its great head snakes around the back of the throne and rears up behind its king. The rough coral rips Gideon's skin like a rasp as it tightens around his body, and this thing's huge, narrow head bears down on him. 2 sets of jagged coral teeth line its mouth. On the throne, the king sits up, and his mouth opens, revealing teeth. Jagged shards of coral pushed down through his skull and out of his mouth. And the king of tides lets out a long, hacking laugh. And in the far distance, the sound of the clanking warning bells once again begins to echo down the tunnels and into the heart. Thank you a million times. Thank you for watching. Please like this video, subscribe if you've not done so already, and click the little bell icon so you can be notified as soon as the next video drops. I'll be back next time, but until then, it is farewell and safe passage.